Slow English, timeless stories, quiet moments. Welcome back to Quiet English with Jacque. I'm Jacque, and I'm glad you've joined me. In our last episode, we watched Patrasche begin a new life. After years of hardship and cruelty, he was rescued by Jehan Daas and his young grandson Nello in the story The Dog of Flanders by Ouida. Though they had very little, they gave the dog something he had never truly known before: a safe place to rest, food to eat, and people who cared for him. And Patrasche, in return, gave them his loyalty. Our story now moves forward. Jehan Daas is an old soldier, and his body is no longer strong enough to do the work he once could. Life is still difficult, and there is very little money to spare. But Patrasche has grown stronger, and now the faithful dog, who was once too weak even to stand, will become an important part of the little family's daily life. In today's chapter, we'll see how Nello, his grandfather, and Patrasche begin to make their living together. And now, how the simple rhythm of their lives begins to take shape. So, as always, settle into a comfortable place, take a slow, deep breath, and let's return to Flanders. Now, the old soldier, Jehan Daas, could do nothing for his living but limp about a little with a small cart, with which he carried daily the milk cans of those happier neighbors who owned cattle away in the town of Antwerp. The villagers gave him the employment a little out of charity, more because it suited them well to send their milk into the town by so honest a carrier, and bide at home themselves to look after their gardens, their cows, their poultry, or their little fields. It was becoming hard work for the old man. He was 83, and Antwerp was a good league off or more. Patrasche watched the milk cans come and go that one day when he had got well and was lying in the sun with the wreath of marguerites round his tawny neck. The next morning, Patrasche, before the old man had touched the cart, arose and walked to it and placed himself betwixt its handles, and testified as plainly as dumb show could do his desire and his ability to work in return for the bread of charity that he had eaten. Jehan Daas resisted long, for the old man was one of those who thought it a foul shame to bind dogs to labor for which nature never formed them. But Patrasche would not be gainsaid. Finding they did not harness him, he tried to draw the cart onward with his teeth. At length, Jehan Daas gave way, and vanquished by the persistence and the gratitude of this creature whom he had succored. His fashioned cart was so that Patrasche could run in it, and this he did every morning of his life thenceforward. When the winter came, Jehan Daas thanked the blessed fortune that had brought him to the dying dog in the ditch that fair day of Louvain. For he was very old, and he grew feebler with each year, and he would ill have known how to pull his load of milk cans over the snows and through the deep ruts in the mud if it had not been for the strength and the industry of the animal he had befriended. As for Patrasche, it seemed heaven to him, after the frightful burdens that his old master had compelled him to strain under. At the call of the whip at every step, it seemed nothing to him but amusement to step out with this little light green cart, with its bright brass cans, by the side of the gentle old man who always paid him with a tender caress and with a kindly word. Besides, his work was over by 3 or 4 in the day, and after that time he was free to do as he would, to stretch himself, to sleep in the sun, to wander in the fields, to romp with the young child, or to play with his fellow dogs. Patrasche was very happy. Fortunately for his peace, his former owner was killed in a drunken brawl at the Kermesse of Mechelen, and so sought not after him nor disturbed him in his new and well-loved home. A few years later, Jehan Daas, who had always been a cripple, became so paralyzed with rheumatism that it was impossible for him to go out with the cart any more. Then little Nello, being now grown to his 6th year of age, and knowing the town well from having accompanied his grandfather so many times, took his place beside the cart and sold the milk and received the coins in exchange, and brought them back to their respective owners with a pretty grace and seriousness which charmed all who beheld him. The little Ardennes was a beautiful child, with dark, grave, tender eyes, and a lovely bloom upon his face, and fair locks that clustered to his throat. And many an artist sketched the group as it went by him, the green cart with the brass flagons of Teniers and Myers and Van Tye, and the great tawny-colored, massive dog with his bellied harness and chimed cheerily as he went. And the small figure that ran beside him, which had little white feet in great wooden shoes, and a soft, grave, innocent, happy face, like the little fair children of Rubens. Nello and Patrasche did the work so well and so joyfully together that Jehan Daas himself, when the summer came and he was better again, had no need to stir out, but could sit in the doorway in the sun and see them go forth through the garden wicket, and then doze and dream and pray a little, and then awake again as the clock tolled 3 and watch for their return. And on their return, Patrasche would shake himself free of his harness with a bay of glee, and Nello would recount with pride the doings of the day, and they would all go in together to their meal of rye bread and milk or soup, and would see the shadows lengthen over the great plain, and see the twilight veil the fair cathedral spire, and then lie down together to sleep peacefully while the old man said a prayer. So the days and the years went, and the lives of Nello and Patrasche were happy, innocent, and healthful. In the spring and summer especially were they glad. Flanders is not a lovely land, and around the borough of Rubens it is perhaps least lovely of all. Corn and colza pasture and plow succeed each other on the characterless plain in weary repetition, and, save by some gaunt gray tower with its peal of pathetic bells, or some figure coming athwart the fields, made picturesque by a gleaner's bundle or a woodman's faggot, there is no change, no variety, no beauty anywhere. And he who has dwelt upon the mountains or amidst the forests feels oppressed, as by imprisonment, with the tedium and the endlessness of that vast and dreary level. But it is green and very fertile. And it has wide horizons that have a certain charm of their own, even in their dullness and monotony. And among the rushes, by the waterside, the flowers grow, and the trees rise tall and fresh, where the barges glide with their great hulks black against the sun, and their little green barrels and vari-colored flags gay against the leaves. Anyway, there is greenery and breadth of space enough to be as good as beauty to a child and a dog, and these two asked no better, when their work was done, than to lie buried in the lush grasses on the side of the canal and watch the cumbrous vessels drifting by and bringing the crisp salt smell of the sea among the blossoming scents of the country summer. True, in the winter it was harder, and they had to rise in the darkness and the bitter cold, and they had seldom as much as they could have eaten any day, and the hut was scarce better than a shed when the nights were cold, although it looked so pretty in warm weather. Buried in a great kindly clambering vine, and never bore fruit, indeed, but which covered it with luxuriant green tracery all through the months of the blossom and harvest. In winter, the winds found many holes in the walls of the poor little hut, and the vine was black and leafless, and the bare lands looked very bleak, drear without, and sometimes within the floor was flooded and then frozen. The winter, it was hard, and the snow numbed the little white limbs of Nello, and the icicles cut the brave, untiring feet of Patrasche. But even then, they were never heard to lament, either of them. The child's wooden shoes and the dog's 4 legs would trot manfully together over the frozen fields to the chime of the bells on the harness. And then sometimes, in the streets of Antwerp, some housewife would bring them a bowl of soup and a handful of bread, or some kindly trader would throw some billets of fuel into the little cart as it went homeward, or some woman in their own village would bid them keep some share of the milk they carried for their own food, and then they would run over the white lands through the early darkness, bright and happy, and burst with a shout of joy into their home. So on the whole, it was well with them. Very well. Patrasche, meeting on the highway or in the public streets the many dogs who toiled from daybreak into nightfall, paid only with blows and curses, and loosened from the shafts with a kick to starve and freeze as best they might. Patrasche, in his heart, was very grateful for his fate, and thought it of the fairest and the kindliest the world could hold. Though he was often very hungry, Indeed, when he lay down at night, though he had to work in the heats of summer noons and the rasping chills of winter dawns, though his feet were often tender with wounds from the sharp edges of the jagged pavement, though he had to perform tasks beyond his strength and against his nature, yet he was grateful and content. He did his duty with each day, and the eyes that he loved smiled down on him. It was sufficient for Patrasche. There was only one thing which caused Patrasche any uneasiness in his life, and it was this. Antwerp, as all the world knows, is full at every turn of old piles of stones, dark and ancient and majestic, standing in crooked courts, jammed against gateways and taverns, rising by the water's edge, with bells ringing above them in the air, and ever and again out of their arched doors a swell of music pealing. There they remain, the grand old sanctuaries of the past, shut in amidst the squalor, the hurry, the crowds, the unloveliness, the commerce of the modern world. And all day long the clouds drift, and the birds circle, and the winds sigh around them. And beneath the earth, at their feet, there sleeps Rubens. And here we will leave Nello for today. He has stood beneath the great paintings of Rubens, surrounded by the beauty and history of the cathedral. Perhaps for the first time he begins to understand that the world can hold beauty far greater than anything he has known. Sometimes a single moment can awaken something inside of us, a dream, a hope, or a desire for something more. And for Nello, that moment has begun. Thank you for spending this quiet time with me and for listening to Quiet English with Jacque. If you have a story you think belongs here, a quiet story, a still story, a story worth sitting with, I would love to hear about it. And especially if you are a writer and you have written something gentle and true that you would like me to read, please send it to me. I will read it. So send it to me by email at jacqueeddyvoice@gmail.com. Jacque is spelled Jacque, and Eddie is Eddy. Until next time, please like this podcast if you can, share this podcast, and please subscribe to this podcast. Be still, be safe, and keep listening. God bless.